Hi class, welcome to OD Interventions Part 2. This would focus more on interventions at the team level and at the individual level. Medyo mahaba, so hang on. Before we start, let's have a quick review of what we've done. Okay, let's recall our example on designing the OD intervention after we do our organizational assessment. Recall that we can look at different focal areas. We can have interventions at different levels. Earlier, pinag-usapan natin yung organization-wide. And then we can have different activities, different modes of intervention. OD is a science since interventions are meant to address pains identified during the organizational assessments. Because of the complexity and fluidity of organizations and its environment, the challenge of determining relevant, significant, and empowering OD interventions becomes an art. In other words, maraming paraan para ma-address yung pain na identify natin sa organizational assessment. Minsan tinatansya na lang natin kung alin nga ba ang pinaka-akmang intervention para sa panahon at sitwasyon ng organisasyon. There's a wide range of possible OD interventions that can be applied at different levels. As a community development and OD practitioner, you have to facilitate reflection of the organization on the theory, practice, and potential outcomes of these interventions. You have to disrupt the passive and static organizational practices that will eventually hamper the organization's ability to create people-centered change and development. Malinaw na it's not just about making things efficient, but we have an agenda for people-centered development. So we mentioned that there are several examples of OD interventions at various levels of the organization. Last session, we discussed the system level, looking at strategic interventions. Nabanggit natin na isa sa pinaka commonly practiced intervention yung strategic planning. Sometimes it feels like a reset of the organization because we're reviewing the organization from a lot of angles. From the vision, mission, goals, strategies, down to the activity level, pinagplaplanuhan natin. And some would say that that's the prime example of OD intervention because it's a planned change. It's your starting point, your baseline. We discussed that learning and knowledge management are key strategies so that the organization can go surf the permanent white waters of its environment. Kailangan maging adaptive siya. We looked at different organizational structures. Pwedeng i-design ito. Hindi tayo nakatali dun sa bureaucratic model of the organization. We also looked at leadership development, how this may look like an individual intervention, but it has an impact on the overall systems of the organization. Ngayon, pag-usapan natin yung sa team level at saka sa individual level. Some would call it the team level at saka inter-team level. Some would call it human process interventions because this is very much related to relationships, processes. And then later on, we will also look at the individual level, which some would categorize as human resource management interventions. Okay, let's go to team level interventions. So yung isang common OD intervention is team building or team development. Sa inyo, paano ba conduct ng team building ng inyong organisasyon? What does your team building hope to achieve? Is it successful? Minsan kailangan tignan sa team development ay ma-assess kung anong stage yung team sa kanyang life cycle. Yung una sa life cycle niya, yung forming, yung binubuo pa yung team. Dito kakapasok pa lang ng mga team members, hindi pa alam kung ano yung gagawin. Hindi pa minsan makakilala kung sino-sino sila. So low commitment and trust. Sometimes the tasks and objectives are still not yet clear, still being defined. The second level is storming. Dito, pagkatapos magkaroon ng konting clarification, nagkakaroon kuminsan ng resistance to the articulated roles and responsibilities dahil hindi mo masyadong kilala pa yung mga team members mo, mga teammates mo, may mga relational conflict. And if you survive that, go into the norming stage where norm standards, a system of consensus building, a feedback system, lahat yan nagsisimulang mabuo. Nagsisimula na rin magkaroon ng trust at commitment ang mga members ng team. Then you reach your apex of performing team where clear roles are there, but people are already comfortable with those roles and they are able to adapt and become flexible as the environment changes. They become collaborative, they become supportive. And then the last stage is adjourning, a disbandment of the team after the project or the task ends. You have to assess the context of the team. Anong stage nga ba siya? Dahil kuminsan yung intervention na kailangan ng team ay depende kung nasang stage siya. Iba't ibang krisis ang nararamdaman ng team sa iba't ibang stage. For example, sa forming, ang isang critical ay who's in, who's out, kaya inclusion. Sa storming, kadalasan nagkakaroon ng conflict dahil people want to have control or you want to push for your own system. Sa norming, dahil nandiyan na yung mga norms, mga standards, want to have cohesion, making sure that the policies that we've installed will lead you to the right direction. When you're already performing and you have adaptive management on the fly, you want to make sure that the identity of the team is there. And when you're adjourning, you have those separation anxieties. How do you have closure? So anong pwedeng intervention o anong kailangang intervention sa bawat isa, no? Sa forming, dito kailangan ng malakas na direction and guidance dahil nga nagsisimula pa lang. Sa storming, maaaring kailangan ng coaching, listening skills, clarifications of the different roles, and sometimes you have to have some give and take, some compromise. Nasa norming stage, pag-heighten ng pag-develop ng skills on facilitation, feedbacking, reviewing the different roles and responsibilities, sometimes training the team members so that they would increase their competence. Sa performing, delegation, future planning, recognition of people who are performing. Tapos kung nandun ka na sa adjourning stage, review your evaluation, recognition of the people who have performed well, rewards. So when you provide the intervention for team building, team development, yung isang sinuggest ng Ateneo Accord ay may mga ilang steps o mga areas na kailangang tignan. Unang-una dito yung work system and processes. What's the system that you're going to install? And the activities here would be some norming meetings, yung initial meeting para mabuo yung team. Installation of performance management and communication system para mas maayos yung management ng team. And then you look at team member competence. You have development workshops on conflict management, diversity management, feedbacking, facilitation. Sometimes you have team competitions para tumaas yung level of competence ng mga members. And then you look at the social relationships. Dito pumapasok yung team building activities. Sometimes the team, when you say team building, ito lang yung ginagawa, kaya nagmumukhang fun and games lang siya, o kaya rest and recreation, kaya pagkatapos ng outing, hindi makita kung paano nga ba nagkakaroon ng impact yung team building sa actual team. Sometimes there would be game simulations which are far from the reality of the work, so hindi talaga natatranslate yung activity into better performance. And then after that, we look at the leadership. Here the activities would include catch-up sessions at the professional and personal level. In other words, kamustahan ng leader at saka ng mga miyembro. Leadership skills development, human resource management systems, dahan-dahan ang pinapasok dito. So maraming proseso na kailangang tignan, at ang nabanggit na enabling factors para maging successful itong team development process na to ay dapat makita na hindi siya one-off activity. It's a very process-oriented process. Has multiple activities. The team has to be open to that process. It would really help if the members of the team have shared experience. It would help if there's a sense of permanence. Kung masyadong mabilis, hindi mo makikita masyado yung high-performing team kung after a few weeks dissolve na kagad yung team. Especially if you just start from scratch. Meron bang resources for this kind of a development process? Is there an external champion that will support this team development process? Are the different stakeholders engaged in this team development process? Aside from just focusing on your team, subunit, group, we also want to look at how does your team relate with other teams in your own organization. How does the organization ensure that the different teams work in synergy instead of silos, instead of kanya-kanya lang? Paano nga ba nagkakaroon ng complementation at magiging effective organization? So again, we start by assessing or characterizing the relationship between the different groups. In one axis, we can see the level of desire for teamwork. On the other axis, we can see the level of assertiveness to have that interaction amongst teams. So at the lowest levels, we have avoidance. The teams are independent from each other. They may have different goals such that intergroup interaction is actually unnecessary. Increase natin yung assertiveness, becomes competing since they have no desire for teamwork. It could be that their goals are incompatible, so but with necessary interactions. This sometimes breeds conflict, or it can also yield some positive outcome because of the competition. On the extreme of the desire for teamwork but no assertiveness, sometimes we just accommodate each other. There's that give and take relationship, but each group has their own autonomy to achieve their own goals, leading to less interactions. In between, you have that compromising relationship wherein there is moderate interaction, moderate degree of compatibility of goals. And some would say that your desire is to have collaboration where you have high desire for teamwork and assertiveness for interaction. interaction achieves complementary goals. Each group contributes to the common goal. Dysfunctionalities are usually due to limited funds, resources, incompatibility of goals, incompatibility of time, at minsan yung behavior antagonistic influence tactics. So what are the mechanisms toward positive intergroup relations? Isa yung magkaroon ka ng overarching superordinate goals wherein the different teams can work together. Another level is having that capacity to negotiate amongst the teams. And then it will be good if you have a lot of opportunities for interactions. Kung minsan hindi talaga maganda ang relasyon ng ilang units dahil yung isa ay nasa field parati, yung isa parating nasa office, kaya walang level of interaction. And then that intergroup development framework wherein each group is able to discuss among themselves what their agenda is, what their objectives is, their ways of working, try to solidify that within their group, and then they engage into that intergroup dialogue wherein they share the agenda, the practice, and then try to resolve issues among themselves, and then planning, intergroup planning and action. We can discuss this a bit later, wherein a different model actually provides more detail into this process. Conflict management. This conflict, why do we need to manage it inside an organization? How does your organization manage internal conflict, and how effective is it? Masabi natin ang conflict ay parating nandyan, it's omnipresent, it's double-edged, it can be used for good and bad. Sometimes it's cyclical, may pattern ang conflict. Conflict creates change, it generates energy. It's influenced by a lot of things from biology, personality, culture, etc. There are several models for conflict management. This is one model. It comes from the Gasteiz Ortigas Peace Institute. It's their model for conflict resolution. Sabi na, simula tayo sa pag-intindi kung ano nga ba yung conflict. Tignan natin kung ano yung issue, yung kultura, yung mga relasyon ng mga tao, ano yung power dynamics, at kung may nakakaramdam ng injustice, unfairness sa mga bahagi na to, doon nagkakaroon ng pagputok ng conflict. At one level, we go into that intra-group discussion wherein we try to build group unity. Ano nga bang pinapaniwalaan natin? Ano yung agenda natin? Kailangan natin magka-unite dun sa mga areas na ito bago tayo mag-engage dun sa kabilang grupo. So the next wing is establish that link with the other party. And then once we have already established our own unities, let's disclose that issue with the other party. And the assumption is that group will also have its own group unity processes. So once we disclose the issues with the other party, we try to arrive at mutually agreed solutions. We do not necessarily need to try to convert or convince the other party to change their minds immediately. We try to look at areas for convergence and divergence and try to look for mutually agreed solutions. We try to implement and monitor, and then we heal and reconcile. So there's a lot of dialogue skills involved, from listening, suspending, voicing, respecting. Ang mahalaga dito ay hinahabol natin na maayos yung relasyon, hindi lang ma-resolve yung issue. Another team-level intervention is process consultation, wherein you have a process consultant that helps the organization. It is the creation of a relationship with the client that permits the client to perceive, understand, and act on the process events that occur in the client's internal and external environment in order to improve the situation as defined by the client. Medyo familiar siya dahil hinahayaan na yung organisasyon mismo yung kumilala dun sa problema at gumawa ng mga solusyon para sa mga problema niya. At ang proseso ay yung pagkilala na ibang tao, yung consultant, may pakikiramdam na ginagawa, yung consultant, pagmamasid, pagtatanong, pakikipagkwentuhan at sama-samang talakayan. Hindi ito masyadong ginagamit ng mga NGOs. Wala masyadong consultant, wala masyadong pera para kumuha ng process consultant. But when you try to look at it, this is actually what community organizers do or provide for people's organizations. This is the OD intervention of community organizers. Okay, now we look into individual interventions, mostly in the realm of human resource management interventions. Human resource management interventions. We can look at Ateneo Corp's total performance management framework, wherein we start with the vision and mission. Sabi natin sa strategic planning, madedefine dito yung strategy and objectives, but the vision and mission also defines the culture and the competencies that the organization needs. And from these two wings, lumalabas yung individual performance planning and commitment. Ano bang ine-expect sa bawat individual para magawa yung mga strategiya mo at para maging aligned yung kultura at saka yung mga competencies ng mga tao doon sa vision and mission. And then from this, from one wing, we look at the performance review, basing that on the objectives. And then, since these are the competencies required, ano yung kailangan na staff development para maabot natin yung competencies nga. And then, how do we reward people? So, ito yung buong performance management framework. And we can look at the human resource management from from these elements. Some international NGOs would use competency-based HR, wherein they define core competencies of the organization, the knowledge, skills, attributes, and requirements. And then using these core competencies, ginagawa nila yung kanilang recruitment strategy. They set their performance standards, they evaluate performance of staff, they design learning and staff development, and they some would even base their rewards and benefits on the core competencies. Roadblocks for this would take a lot of resources, a lot of time. Some would have difficulty in defining core competencies. Tapos kuminsan nagbabago nga yung needs ng organization. Another holistic HR management framework is talent management, which is quite similar, wherein you have predicting the talent requirements of the organization, you profile the critical competencies, you pick and place the right talent, you prepare for performance of that talent. In other words, you orient them on the job, and then you plan, monitor, and reward the performance, and then you provide a career growth development plan for the individuals. So that's it for now. Let's have more discussion and examples during the actual online class. Thanks.